Good morning, Javier Becerra, Attorney General for the state of California. I'm joined today by Tam Ma, who is someone who has worked on healthcare issues for quite some time here in California. She is here on behalf of Health Access California as their director, and I'm pleased that she has joined us today for this important announcement. As you know, things are pretty crazy these days in Washington, D.C. Perhaps nothing crazier than the fact that the president, Donald Trump, believes that he can pick and choose which laws he wishes to enforce. For many of us, it's long past time that President Donald Trump learned that he doesn't get to pick and choose which laws to follow. Perhaps as a good example of this, I'll take the last 24 hours where on now 3 occasions Donald Trump has and his administration have been slapped down by our federal courts. Yesterday, as you're aware, the president's Muslim travel ban was once again rejected by a federal district court. Today, a second federal district court came down with the same conclusion that the Trump Muslim travel ban should not go into effect. And yesterday, I'll mention, in case you're not aware, that the Trump administration, specifically here, the Department of Homeland Security, was slapped down by the courts for its unwillingness to provide documentary evidence that was requested by us, the California Department of Justice, in our case filed on behalf of the DACA Dreamers about 2 weeks ago. We had requested that the Trump administration provide us with the documents to prove the basis for their action, because we believe that that action was not only unconstitutional and against federal law, but it was done in an arbitrary and capricious manner. We asked for documents that we are obviously entitled to see as a result of this litigation. And yesterday, the federal court dealing with this case agreed that the Trump administration had not made sufficient, quite honestly, any effort to respond to that request. And so here we see the Trump administration being slapped down by our federal courts for its failure to follow the law. Is it any surprise to folks that now we find ourselves in the midst of having millions of Californians lose their health insurance or have to pay far more for their health insurance through their premiums and deductibles and copays because Donald Trump, again, doesn't wish to follow the law? I think the best way to categorize what Donald Trump is doing with the Affordable Care Act is to call it sabotage, plain and simple. He has made it very clear by using words like implode or explode the Affordable Care Act. He's made it very clear that he did not want the Affordable Care Act to survive. And so when he guts the cost-sharing subsidy payments that are the lifeblood for millions of Californians and Americans throughout this country to be able to afford their health insurance, you can see that he's serious about exploding the Affordable Care Act. He's threatening access for millions of Americans to decent quality health care. And it's time for him to stop playing this game, because for too many people, it's not a game. It's the difference between paying their rent or paying their medical bills. Interestingly enough, the Trump administration today is now taking the position that they cannot make these cost-sharing subsidy payments, that it would be a violation of the law. Yet for nearly a year, Donald Trump has been making those very payments. For some 10 months, Donald Trump has submitted those payments. So the question has to be, is Donald Trump correct today? And if so, was he then violating the law for at least 10 months? Or is Donald Trump playing the game of trying to explode the Affordable Care Act and therefore refusing to do what he's supposed to do in following the law and paying these subsidies? Donald Trump has to answer that question. Either way, I think we can agree that the actions of the President of the United States to deny people affordable health care insurance or make it so that they will pay more money out of pocket for that health insurance is not only irresponsible, but it is illegal. we have to remember there's not one court in America that has told Donald Trump not to make these cost-sharing subsidy payments. This is Donald Trump's decision and only his decision alone to stop making these cost-sharing subsidy payments that help Americans afford their health insurance. If Americans lose their health insurance, it's not because the courts required him to stop making the payments. It's because Donald Trump made this decision to stop making these vital health subsidy payments that keep Americans insured. That's why last Friday, when Donald Trump made this announcement that he was going to stop making those required legal payments, my team here at the California Department of Justice filed a lawsuit to prevent that from happening. We were joined in that lawsuit by 18 of my fellow attorneys general throughout the country. And today, we're continuing that fight. We have filed, as of today, an emergency temporary restraining order to force the Trump administration to keep making the cost-sharing subsidy payments that keep millions of Californians and Americans insured. In that lawsuit, we argue that the payments are required by law, and the decision to stop making those payments violates the Administrative Procedures Act. The Trump administration's abrupt decision to stop making those payments is also arbitrary and capricious. As the president himself has said, he's been wanting to, quote-unquote, finish the Affordable Care Act or, quote-unquote, implode the Affordable Care Act, or, as I said before, explode, quote-unquote, the Affordable Care Act through his executive actions. The president is also violating a provision in the Constitution that we call the Take Care Clause. This is the clause in the Constitution that requires the executive branch to follow the laws and not disregard them. It is his responsibility to fully and faithfully execute the laws. And so it's his responsibility to take care that those laws are faithfully enforced. And the worst irony, perhaps, of Donald Trump's reckless decision to stop making these cost-sharing subsidy payments that millions of Americans rely on to keep their insurance is the fact that it's not only costing millions of Americans their health insurance or costing them more to maintain their health insurance, it's also costing taxpayers billions of dollars more in the healthcare system. There's no savings here. That's the cruel fact about Donald Trump's decision, is Americans who are trying to stay insured for their families lose, and taxpayers who are helping those families afford their health insurance also lose. Donald Trump should recognize a bad deal when he sees it. This is a bad deal for all Americans, and that's why today we filed for an emergency temporary restraining order to stop the president from once again doing something that not only harms Americans, but makes no sense whatsoever at all. With that, let me now ask Tam Ma to please step forward and give us some comments as well. Tam.
Thank you, Attorney General Becerra. My name is Tam Ma, and I am with Health Access California. We are the state healthcare consumer advocacy coalition working for quality and affordable health care for all Californians. The Affordable Care Act is still the law of the land, and Senator Mitch McConnell and Speaker Paul Ryan acknowledged this fact when they failed to gather enough votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act this year. Unfortunately, the president has made it very clear that consumers are not a priority for him. His decision to defund the cost-sharing reductions has led to double-digit premium increases here in California. He had also abruptly decided to stop funding this program at the worst possible time, 2 weeks before open enrollment starts on November 1st. These actions discourage consumers from signing up for coverage and help that they are legally entitled to and also legally required to have. I'm here today to remind consumers that Covered California is still open for business, that folks can sign up for coverage and renew coverage beginning November 1st all the way through the end of January, and that Medi-Cal is open for sign-ups every day of the year. I'll next talk about what these cost sharing reductions mean for average consumers. In California, there are 670,000 consumers who get significant discounts on their out-of-pocket costs, such as copays and deductibles and coinsurance, thanks to these cost-sharing reductions. These are not bailouts of insurance companies, as some have called them. These are help for consumers to be able to go to the doctor. This means that consumers pay less when they do go to the doctor or go get an X-ray or an imaging test or go to the hospital. These discounts allow families to have financial stability so that they don't have to pick and choose between paying for health care versus paying for rent or food or for school clothes for their kids. One example of how these cost-sharing reductions make a important impact for consumers is the reduction in the annual deductible. The deductible for a regular silver plan without any cost-sharing reduction subsidies is $2,500 a year. That means a consumer has to spend $2,500 out of pocket for their health care before their insurance kicks in for a lot of services. With these cost-sharing reductions, the deductible can go down to $2,200, $650, or even as little as $75, depending on a consumer's annual income. And this is a big deal. $2,500, $75. What's the better deal here? And we hope that, as the Attorney General said, that President Trump would understand, what is a good deal for consumers and what is not. A visit to an ER would cost a consumer with only $50 with these discounts rather than $350. Again, which price is right and which one is too high. And people who qualify for these discounts for the out-of-pocket costs are folks who are working, working very hard and make up to about $29,000 a year for an individual or $61,000 for a family of four. These are very modest incomes for people in a high-cost state like California. I also want to remind folks about the responsibility that our 14 Republican congressional members from the California delegation have in the chaos that's been created this year with all the efforts to try to repeal the ACA and sabotage the healthcare system. The House Republicans are still pursuing their lawsuit to eliminate the financial help for these out-of-pocket costs. And again, Californians, we have 200,000 constituents in the 14 Republican congressional districts here in California who collectively receive about $193 million in federal funding to help them afford their doctor's payments and hospital visits. This is actual cash and money that is staying in the pockets of Californians here, and we are, incredibly disappointed that our congressional representatives are not standing up for their constituents. And with that, I'd like to close and just thank the Attorney General for representing the interests of California and of consumers in defending their right to quality and affordable health care.
Thanks very much, everybody.